Hello everybody. This video will be on judging expectations. So basically what is judging, what you should expect, what you should look for, etc., etc. If you have no idea what debate is or what CNDF is, you probably want to watch the other video first before coming back to this one. This one will not be covering those things. However, if you already know what exactly is going on with debate, then you are welcome to continue watching. So without further ado, we'll get started. First thing is, what do judges do? Judges, their job is to pay attention throughout the round and listen to the arguments presented by the debaters. It's pretty important that you take notes as the round progresses to ensure that you remember the round. So what you find is that if you don't take notes and you just kind of sit there and you just listen, a lot of debaters, especially really good ones, they'll sway you back and forth between every speech. After the proposition goes, you're going to be like, yeah, they're right. And the opposition goes, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, they're right. And then that leaves it so that essentially when you're voting, the last person that spoke is the one that won, right? So what you really want to do then is take notes and afterwards be able to review it to sort of take a more holistic look at the round. So not only do you want to pay attention throughout the round, but you also really do want to take notes as the round progresses. Even someone who's a little bit more experienced with debate judging like me, I've been judging for the past probably 5-6 years. I still need to take notes. Honestly, if I don't take notes, I don't remember nearly enough of the round to be able to make a proper judgment. Now, judges then obviously decides the winner of the round. They get to award who wins. This means that you are the only person, or the panel is the only people that gets to decide. So I don't get to influence that. The debaters can't debate you and afterwards and say, oh, but it's your decision to make that round, and that's it. And then you also decide the speaker scores, okay, awarded to each speaker. So we'll talk about what the scoring range is later on, but that's your job. So you listen, you pay attention, you decide the winner of the round, and then you decide the speaker scores. Now the question is obviously how to judge. Well, it's pretty simple. You listen to the debaters and evaluate their arguments as presented. This means that you don't want to complete any arguments or counter-arguments for the debaters. This means that, let's say the debaters say something and you're like, oh, that's a really good point, but only if they actually said this one thing more or made this other logical connection, then would have been an excellent point. But as is, it's only okay. Do not complete the argument for them. You award them as it was presented. If you're like, this point, was absolutely false. The factual basis, the assumption that they're making is just false because it's your field of study. Do not insert yourself into the round. If the other side also assumes that that's true, then that's true. If they're all debating and they're like, oh, well, this is the law, and you're a lawyer, that's not true, that's not how court proceedings go or whatever, you cannot put yourself into the round. This also means, this is just a side note, that please make sure when you're giving comments to the debaters, you make a clear distinction between what influenced your decision and what arguments you thought the debaters could have made. Because a lot of times when judges give comments that are like, oh, you should have done this, or this probably would have been a much better decision to make during the round, or this is actually the case, so therefore what you said was actually not true. A lot of the time to judges, that is basically comments to take into next round or further rounds, basically saying, here's the suggestions I would give, but it didn't influence my decision. However, the debaters, who especially the ones who have lost, will really take it into heart that, that is why we lost the round, because the judge completed an argument for them, or the judge just basically refuted an argument, because of their prior knowledge. That's why we lost the round. So make a very clear distinction between what was your reason for decision and what the additional comments to take into further rounds are. So that's a really important point, because otherwise debaters will always complain about their judge. Even if you do this, they'll still complain about you, but at the very least, they probably will be a little bit happier if you make sure you have that very clear distinction. A lot of times it's just a miscommunication, so to prevent that, make sure you have that clear distinction. Okay, Next is you want to look at the comparative. This means that you want to look at which team is more convincing, which team's arguments outweigh the other. What you're really looking at then is kind of which teams you felt, right? Their arguments, right, as presented, were stronger, right? This means that usually in the round, the debaters should, okay, emphasis on shoulds, a lot of times they don't, but they should tell you how you should evaluate the round, right? What are the more important things and why their side is able to achieve it better, right? So you always look at that comparative. Now, what's very important is don't obviously bring in personal bias or knowledge if you have your own political opinions or you have your own opinions on specific issues or you are very knowledgeable about the specific field, whatever it is. Remember, they're high schoolers, they're not expected to know that much. They're very intelligent. However, again, they're still high schoolers. But secondarily is that you really don't want to bring in your own arguments, or if they say something that you personally don't agree with, try to keep an open mind and try not to bring yourself into the debate. See how the other side responds. If the other side responds, in a way that you don't think is, the correct way, that's fine. Evaluate it as such. So it's very important to not bring that personal bias. You want to be what's called a blank slate judge. And so you want to look at that comparative, right? You want to see which side is stronger. So that's the thing. Okay. So that's kind of how to judge, right? That's how you look at which side has actually won the debate, right? You listen to the arguments, you look at it as presented, and then you compare the two sides and you see, okay, which side's arguments are stronger. Usually you look at the sort of the impacts kind of thing. You look at how strong are their logical links, things like that. Okay, next. What to look for. Okay, so this is kind of where judges differ, but we want to try and make it more standardized just for the purposes of this tournament. But basically, there are two things, kind of content is one big umbrella, and then style is another one. Now, as you can see from the number of bullet points, content generally matters a little bit more. It's kind of like food. The taste is kind of the content, the plating is the style. So if you have excellent plating, but the food sucks, then the food still sucks. If the food is excellent but the plating is meh, it still tastes great. You probably still want to eat the food that tastes great. So that's the very important aspect. Okay. Now, in terms of content, okay, you want to look for clear and concise and well-constructed logical links. Right. This means that each step of the logical links that they're making makes sense. They're not jumping over things. They're not giving you, they're assuming things and but they're not saying them. So then they just go straight to the next point and you're like, wait, really? That's how this works? If you're thinking that, then that probably means that logical link wasn't well established, right? You want to look for relevant examples. These examples could be real life examples from, research, right? Or examples that are entirely hypothetical. In terms of the debates, rounds 1 and 2, what you'll find is that because they're prepared rounds, they will most likely have a lot more research. The rounds 3, 4, 5, they're going to be impromptu rounds. Those rounds are going to be, there's no research, right? So this means it's based entirely off of whatever the debaters have in their minds, and so they shouldn't be doing any research whatsoever. This leads to them obviously having way less, examples that they're going to be able to pull out. So therefore, a lot more hypothetical examples, but again, looking at how relevant they are to explaining their positions and their logic. Then you want to look at realistic assumptions, right? Whenever they make an argument, there's going to be a certain number of assumptions that are made. See to it that they're realistic, right? So that the assumptions or the generalizations that they make about people's motivations or whatever it is reasonable. And then organized speeches. This means that they are clearly flagging where they're going, that their organization is very clear when you're following their speech. There is no point at which you're lost, right? You shouldn't be asking yourself, wait, where are they again? Is this supposed to be refuting the other side, or is this supposed to be their own point, or I'm not sure where they are. If you're thinking that, then that speech, again, probably not very well organized. If you look at your notes and it is very clean, top to bottom, and you know exactly where everything is, that's a great speech. That's very well organized. Lastly is refutation. That is clear and targeted and deconstructs the opponent's arguments well. This means that their refutation is very clear in terms of where they're targeting in terms of their opponent's arguments, and it's well explained, and they deconstruct their opponent's arguments and points out, here are what the weakest logical links are, and here's why they don't work, here's where their assumptions are, here's why those assumptions are false, things like that. Very clear and very targeted. Those are good sort of refutations, and that's kind of what you want to look for. In terms of style, generally in terms of style will vary a lot from debater to debater, and it's not really my place to say what is a good style and what is not, but generally you do want to look for, however, a very clear delivery. This means that they're generally not soft-spoken, they enunciate well, right? They're clear. Important to note that if the student has an accent, do your best to understand what they're saying and don't deduct marks because they have an accent. We want debate to be as inclusive as possible. So some students, if they have an accent, that's not really something that they can help with. So if they have an accent and you can understand them, then just that's that. If there are accents that are too thick and you can't understand them, do your best. But again, judge based on what you can understand. But again, please do not deduct marks because they have an accent or something like that. Next is obviously like very tone, volume, cadence, the general speech stuff, right? Anything that you think would be in a good speech, that's something you should look for in terms of style. But in terms of overall sort of points and sort of weight that you should put, it should be content first, style second. If the content is excellent and the content beats the other side, then that should be what you judge based off of. Style generally, if anything, will affect speaker scores a little bit more, but in terms of really the teams that won, it should really be looking at the content. Okay, so score ranges. All right, this is, I guess, one that is pretty important. So the score range for this tournament will be 82 to 88 in 0.5 increments, unlike the 75 to 95 range. The reason we have this much shorter range is just to try and get everyone to not have too great of fluctuations, because sometimes if this is the first round you ever see, you're going to be really impressed, and then you're going to give them really high score, something like that. Try to stick sort of to the middle in the first rounds, just so you can temper your expectations a little bit. But basically, you can give outside of this range, but we'll probably come around and ask you to justify it. Why is this person getting a 90, right? Something like that. If they are literally the best debater that you could possibly imagine, that could be justified, but again, generally we want to stick within this range. So an 82 is terrible. This means that the debater did not fill their time, was very disorganized, didn't really know what they were talking about at all, and went up there and kind of just stuttered some stuff and said, here's my 2 points, and then sat the back down. That's kind of your very, very beginner debater. 83 to 84. These are students who could see some improvements, right? There's a lot of things that they're doing that maybe aren't the best and they're not filling their time, or they are, but the things that they're saying is kind of rambling a little bit. They do have clear or not very clear ideas in there, and these ideas you could see are pretty good, but obviously they could certainly be improved upon. 85 is kind of your average, right? They do everything decently. They give points. Their speeches have their sort of specific sections, and it seems decently organized. But there's a lot of things that they could also, again, still improve on strategically, or, their arguments could be made better, could be supported by better or more evidence, things like that. 86 to 87, these are debaters who have a clear grasp of debate. They know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, they have clear structure in their debates, and the arguments are decently well thought out. 88 is your excellent or amazing debater, right? This is the debater that you're like, yeah, they're probably making finals, at least they're breaking for sure. You listen to them, and instead of really just thinking about judging, you're like, oh my God, this is a really good speech. Like I might use that argument in my real life. Those are those kinds of debaters, right? These are arguments that are really well organized, very nuanced, very well thought out. So that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of score ranges. Okay, and then next, in terms of frequently asked questions, what if a debater does X? Do I just, do they automatically lose? Generally, no. The only times where a debater would be awarded like a straight up loss is if they say something very, very terrible, not in the sense that it's a bad argument, but terrible in terms of extremely offensive. That, however, please bring it up to us. We will sort of deal with it as necessary. If it's just sort of a violation, but not like that serious, probably like a lower speaker score will be justified for sure. But yeah, there is no auto loss. Again, teams are always comparative, so therefore, as bad as it sounds, there's always a way to lose to whatever bad thing that you're thinking of. So there's no auto loss. However, again, every debater has their roles to fulfill, and so therefore if they don't, then that's probably something that's going to count against their team in terms of how convincing they are. So overall, again, look at the round more holistically. Now, do you have to give comments? We would suggest you do. However, you do not have to. Okay. We do suggest that you do, especially if you're the only judge in the round. Try to do that. It helps the debaters improve. And again, this tournament is all about helping debaters improve, and it's an educational event at the end of the day. So if you can, I would highly suggest you do. But if you really, really feel uncomfortable, that's okay. Are the rounds open adjudication? Yes, for rounds 1 to 4. Round 5 is closed just because we want to keep a little bit of suspense for the break rounds, but they are open adjudication, which means that for rounds 1 to 4, you can tell the debaters who won. Okay. Do you need to have anything with you? Yes, pen and paper or something to take notes with. That's generally the most important thing, and your attention. That's very important. How do you fill in a ballot? That will be covered in the tech briefing because we are doing it all on TabbyCat, but generally, judges, you should be able to see a link in your email that Kevin has sent to you, and that will be where you fill in the ballot. However, it's important to note that only the chair fills in the ballot. Okay, very important. Only the chair fills in the ballot. What if I cannot understand a speaker? Do your best. If they're speaking too fast or they, some kind of like personal choice and you can't understand them, that's probably some kind of penalty. If it's because of an accent, do your best to understand and obviously judge based off of what you can understand. However, don't penalize them for that style. What if there are technical issues? Contact us, the OrgCom, immediately, and we will try and sort it out ASAP. Worst case scenario, if someone drops, we have no way to contact them, whatever it is, their partner might have to IM person. If both members drop, that's when we might have to look at some way to remedy that. However, if it, push comes to shove, we have to get the tournament moving, then we're just going to have to forfeit, have the team forfeit. However, make sure you contact us. Our numbers and our emails are all in the landing page, so make sure you let us know. Okay. If there are any other questions, again, there will be a question and answer period in the briefing time. So therefore, if you have any other questions, please let me know. Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching.